I Hurt is a podcast for all young people who have been wounded in their heart, in their relationship with God, in their body, or in reputation. I Hurt is for those who daily, often silently, cry, I hurt, but feel unheard. You aren't. I Hurt stands on the truth that Jesus Christ loves you and God your Father grieves deeply over what has been done or said to or about you. I Hurt is about God first, then about us. We believe God too cries, I hurt. Not only over the things done to us, but he equally hurts over the things done by us that hurt others and hurt him.
Welcome to I Heard. I'm your host, Brad Ringer, and I have a couple special ladies with me tonight. First of all, my cohort in crime here, Jodi, who's with me every week.
Hi.
And we're going to introduce another guest to you in just a second. But I'm going to hold up something, Jodi, that I know you love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
You know what it is. And
Yep.
Stacie, I know you love it too. It's Cadbury.
Cadbury.
Okay. All right. Stacie used to go on missions trips with us, and we would go to Birmingham, England, where the Cadbury factory was.
Oh, yes.
And we would always roll down the window when we drove by the factory, and everybody'd stick their heads out the window and go,
Cadbury factory!
Do you know the best thing about that place is that when you go in, you go around, they just give out free chocolate the whole way around. Did you go in?
It smells so amazing.
Yes. So it is addicting. Anyway, but Jodi, of course, is from England. And our guest tonight is Stacie. And Stacie, we used to take missions trips to England. And did you go on 5?
No, like 9.
9? Okay, right. The only person that's been on more missions trips we figured out than you was Bonnie. And that's because that was my daughter, Bonnie.
Because there was a gap in the time between when I got married and when I went back again.
Yes.
That would be the year.
Anyway, Stacie absolutely loves England. She always has. When she was a teenager, I mean, she ate England, slept England, breathed England, dressed England.
How do you dress England?
I bought English national team apparel.
Yeah.
I had Doc Martens with flowers on them. I think we get the flowered Doc Martens from the store in London. Whatever.
That's cool.
And she could quote any line from any Monty Python movie. And when we would go to England, we would create little videos as like mementos. And so what was it? The Art of Not Being Seen, I think, was one of them.
The Value of Not Being Seen.
The Value of Not Being Seen.
We did that with Ben Ralph.
Yes. And we had a thing called the Sikh Poop Bridge. I don't know if you remember that one or not. Okay, I got to explain that one probably. But we were at this place called the Red Hill Christian Center, and there was a Sikh compound up on the hill. And when it rained, their sewage would flow down into Red Hill.
Oh.
And there was a little bridge. So we had to actually build on this bridge a dam to keep the sewage from coming down into the Christian camp. Well, we turned it into a skit and into a video. We probably even came up with some songs about it, but we called it the Sikh Poop Bridge. And I still remember you, Stacie, being on the bridge with me, us trying to get through the takes. And we were
we couldn't stop laughing.
We couldn't stop laughing. So the video doesn't make any sense at all. But anyway, we're really digressing here. So, but anyway, when I got to know Stacie, she was a teenager. And I can honestly say of all the kids I ever had in any of the youth groups I had, Stacie was by far my favorite. Okay. For many reasons. She was energetic. She was always there. She was musical. She was athletic. She was funny. You were not shy. You loved the Lord. And like we would walk into a park, she didn't have any problem walking up and talking to people. She really had this very vivacious, deep, loving faith. You ran your own youth group, I think, too, didn't you?
I did, yeah. After I moved to Norfolk, I landed in a church that had no program for teens. And so I got one together, and actually it was Atkins that we organized with a group of English people to do a trip to Virginia after
Oh,
that.
wow.
That's cool.
So you brought English
And
students
brought
over
English
to
people
here.
over here. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, we could talk about England all night, but one of the things about Stacie is you faced a lot of hurt in your life. I think, your high school experience and up through those years, your life was pretty good, pretty cool. I mean, right? You had a great family and church and activities and things like that. But you hit a period of your life at a relatively young age that was probably about the deepest hurt that anyone could ever face. And I was just wondering if you could just, for our listeners, recount that story of that great loss.
The beginning of that. Yeah. When I started dating this boy when I was about, I think I was 17. I think we were juniors. And he had followed me around for a while. It was really annoying to me at first. But after a while, he grew on me and we got to be very close friends. We got married really young, right out of high school. He had joined the Navy. He was 20 and I was 21. And we, finished up school and loaded up our stuff in the back of a 93 Mustang and drove down to Virginia, where he was going to be stationed at Norfolk Naval Base. And that's how we started. It got, because hop into the military and then things get pretty serious pretty quickly as far as like adulting. He was gone on deployments frequently. It was difficult and lonely because, I just picked up and gone to a new place. I feel like I was on the phone with my mom or my best friend pretty much every day. And my phone bill was big back in the days where you had to pay by the minute to talk on the phone. And then I'm pretty sure that everyone old enough to anyway remembers what they were doing on 9/11, where they were when that happened. And I was in a politics class in college, and it was still early in the morning, and he came and knocked on the door of my school, of my classroom. I don't know how he had figured out where I was. He'd gone to the main office or whatever, and they found me. And he came and knocked on the door of my classroom and said, "Can I have my wife back? I think I need to deploy like now." So he came to ask me if I could get out of the class. And we were sitting there watching the news in the class. We had abandoned the class and we were sitting there watching the towers smoking. So it turned out he didn't have to leave right that second, but he left shortly after. The whole battle group was already scheduled to leave, but they left early due to that. So that battle group left, and it was November, the following month, that, you watch the shows or whatever, and the officers come to your door and like, why they're there. That's what it felt like. It wasn't exactly like that because I was taking a nap and my roommate came and woke me up and she was like, "There's officers here, Stacie." And that was when they told me that he was missing. They didn't say, "Oh, he's dead." They're like, they're searching for him, but he's missing. They didn't have a whole lot of the story. And we pieced it together. It took me actually probably years to piece it together because they weren't upfront with me about what had gone wrong. They didn't find him for 3 days. They found him 3 days later. I don't know. It's hard to not like, you're scared and then you're like, no, he's strong, they'll find him. And then you're like, no, it's been too long. And all of my best friends were on that ship with him, and some of them were rescue swimmers. So it was my closest friends who were like out in the water looking for him, and up on the deck, and up the towers, out looking for him. And then when they finally found him, they were like, "You don't want to see him." They closed him up in a casket and shipped him back from Bahrain back here. And it like the world was gonna end. That's what it felt like at the time.
Yeah.
That no amount of nothing that anyone could say. What do you say? Like, he was so young. He was just a kid.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to. I was very close with his family too. You're not supposed to bury your children. So, to be there in that grief with his parents also. My grandfather, who served in the Navy himself, and also, in the Korean War, saw losses there. He was beside himself. So then I was also living his old grief with him. It was just, how do you fix this? People sit around, my family's like this, they want to fix something. So it happens, something's gone wrong, like what can it, and there's nothing you can do. And there's nothing you can do. And everyone just was living with it for that I don't even know how to describe it. It was the saddest thing. And it was more difficult, I think, because I knew that I was not being told the truth about what was happening. There was a level of incompetence surrounding his death. There was a level of just lying. Like, I think he was on what you would call, they called it a VBSS team, as visit, board, search, and seizure. So they would go on behalf of NATO, and they're searching other ships for contraband, Taliban, like people trying to escape other countries. So they have this Iraqi vessel that had been like loaded up with oil, grain, and then they had oil welded these extra compartments to the side so they could fit even more stuff on there. And it was not a seaworthy ship. So they're over there like inspecting the ship, and then a storm came up and the ship went down. And that's how it happened. And after what, I got stories of like, oh, Ben was last seen giving his life jacket to somebody else who was this or that. And like, people tried to give him, I think my friends weren't, I think maybe they made some of that stuff up to try and make me feel better. I don't know if they all got together and said, what can we tell her? Because we don't know what to tell her, or if that like order actually came from on high, like you need to like find a way to make this seem a little bit better, because as far as I could tell, it was nothing but people not paying attention. And so
your grief was compounded by all the misinformation,
by the absolute like it was totally unnecessary in my mind, completely unnecessary. It was frivolity, and the captain was asleep while he had people on other ship, his crew members on a foreign ship in a storm. And I just like found the whole thing to be, something. It took me almost a year to get the JAG report. They didn't want to send. I had to call senators and to get. So thus begins my deep and abiding distrust of the government.
So Stace, I remember, the viewing and the funerals and all those kind of things. And I was with you last time, and I reminded you that of a statement that you said to me. I remember very vividly, you were sitting out back of the funeral home having a cigarette. And I walked up and I sat down next to you, and you apologized for having a cigarette. And I said, you really think that's the thing I'm thinking about right now? But after that, I said, how you doing with the Lord? and you said something along the lines, Brad, I still believe in him, but it's awful hard because I feel like I've been stabbed in my back by my best friend. Okay. I don't know if you remember saying that.
Yep.
Is that how you felt?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And
yeah,
so
you trust, you know, like Ben was my best friend. I was very close to God. You trust him.
Yeah.
With the people that you love and your life, and you go out on a limb and you do all this stuff, you give up your time and your treasure, and that's what happens. But I would say that I understand why that's what I was experiencing at the time. In retrospect, that was a very small-minded approach.
But it was a real one. Like that's what a lot of people feel when they're going through. Like, yeah, well, God, where are you? You said I could trust you, and you said you would be there for me, and now look where I am.
Yep.
And you were away from home. Your support system wasn't there. All this misinformation, you didn't even know for a few days what was going on. You still, even after time, didn't completely know. But as you look back on it now, how did that affect your relationship with God and your relationship with other people? Jodi, you were mentioning before, remember, she was wanted to ask some of our guests, did people say stupid things to you, or did people
so many stupid things?
Yeah. Do you remember any of them?
Oh yeah, I loved one that I got. Well, the Lord never gives us more than we can handle. He promises, and I about lost it because I was like, no, that is about temptation.
Yeah.
He gives us more than we can handle all the time. It's happening right now.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, and it was more than you could bear.
It was what?
It was more than you could bear
at the time.
Yeah. And how long did it take, Stace, for you to start moving forward out of that grief? I mean, I walked through that part of that with you, but I wasn't there because you were moving around. There was all the circumstances around it. What did the weeks and months after that look like?
Oh, you stole my question.
Oh, you want to ask it?
That was exactly the same thing. I was thinking, like, what did it look like those days, and even the year, like the next year ahead? What did the grief look like?
I kind of dropped off of like responsible adulting. I took his life insurance money. I bought a car, and I lived out of my trunk for probably a year. And I drove around and stayed with friends. I went up and down the coast multiple times. Everybody that was there on the ship with him, we were very good friends. I, went around to all of their places in various states because, nobody actually is from Virginia when you're there. So, then you find yourself in Des Moines and New Jersey and, who knows. But that's how I dealt with it. And I was fortunate to be able to do that because of that life insurance money. And that's actually one of the things that I did with that was that trip for the English kids to come here, because I probably funded that 50% myself. And thought that he would be happy about it, Yeah. So I just went ahead and did it. And then I went back to school because, I think there was kind of a narrative then that was wrong for me and I shouldn't have done it. But there's this, if you don't go to school, you'll never go. And I was like, I had one more year of college, and I was afraid that if I didn't go back, I just wouldn't finish. And so I went back, and I shouldn't have done that. I was not done dealing. And I did that, and I didn't do very well.
You were lost.
Yeah, I pushed through. I picked one thing, like I picked my thesis that I was finishing it, and I like was laser focused on that one thing to the detriment of all of my other classes. And I think it was just about like controlling something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't that a way that a lot of people have to try to deal with tremendous hurt and loss, is by trying to find areas of their life that they control? And it probably ultimately proves to you, though, you can't really control anything. Right. So, I mean,
yeah, rearranging the furniture just wasn't going to do it that time.
No. And, I appreciate you, Stace, because, one of the things that you've had to fight through this, sometimes Christians give the impression that, well, I went through this and I got over it, but you had a long battle, and you had to fight really hard, with thoughts and with the grief and with the pain. You had other losses that came later that were on top of that. What kept you going? I mean, what kept that? You're a fighter. That's one of the things I loved about you as a teenager. You always had that attitude. Where did that come from? What kept you going? Why didn't you just cash it in?
I don't know, honestly, Brad, because like when that first happened with Ben, I had a lot of conversations with myself. Like, do I believe this because I believe it, or do I believe this because this is what I've been taught all this time? Like, am I having a crisis right now, or am I good? Am I sound? Me and God, we're okay. And I think I would have been like still okay after that if other things hadn't happened after that. So then once there's a bunch of things happen, like, it's hard not to get jaded after a while. And once you get jaded, I think for a very large portion of the time in between when Ben died and probably right up until about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, but maybe two, I don't know, not that long in the distant past, like my faith was less about faith and more about discipline. Just be like, just standing my ground and just being like, nope, I believe that. And I wasn't going to church for a lot of that time. I wasn't, seeking out my Christian friends for a lot of that time. I wasn't in my Bible. I wasn't focused on it. I think my church was my farm. It was the soil. It was being outside. That was very healing for me. But I think that I didn't really get through it. I was being stubborn about what I had said that I believed all my life.
Yeah. And it's, as I think about that stubbornness, God's grace is, he allows you to be stubborn. He didn't forsake you or write you off. And I think deep down inside you knew that. But, in those subsequent years, we talk occasionally and everything like that. And I'd always kind of just get this undercurrent that, Brad, I still believe in God, but you didn't really want to get in a discussion about it. You weren't in a place where you wanted to. And it was almost like, because you weren't in a position of strength, or you weren't doing well, coming back to me, who was a person who was at you when you were at Vibrant Christian. I mean, is that how you felt? Was it a little bit, you just didn't really want to talk?
I think I had about 10 solid years of like, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and I can't actually describe it any better than that. Like,
yeah,
that he said it right.
I
believe, help my unbelief.
The word that comes to my mind as you've been talking is like, what specific, if there were any, what specific doubts did you have about who God says he is in that time? Like, what were the thoughts that you had that you were stubborn about ignoring and rebuking? Like, what were the doubts and the lies that were creeping in about God's character?
I don't know. I think it was like I was struggling to feel like I understood like his very nature, I guess. You need to go back and read the Old Testament and be like, nope, it's not always like New Testament sunshine and roses and we all love each other. There's lots of other messy stuff going on here. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just like, this isn't working. Like, nothing's working. And so I'm just going to push on.
Was there tension, Stace, within your family through all of it? I'm sure there was, but I mean, was it hard to even be a daughter and a sister during that time? I mean, it seems like you just had to be self-absorbed.
My family is amazingly wonderful. I think probably the blow, like, I don't want to say a nail in the coffin because the coffin's still open, but like the biggest blow in the middle there was when my husband at the time, halfway through our marriage, decided that he was going to be an atheist and he no longer believed in marriage as an institution. And he said this openly to anyone who wanted to talk about it while we were still married. And so in a place where like you know, that person's supposed to be your closest person, like diverging from you that massively, you know, you're just like now I'm fighting the person who's, you know, supposed to be on my side. And so that was a huge, like, I want to say like maybe a lever of apathy. Like when that happened, that was just like, okay, I'm just in survival mode now.
Was it lonely?
Spent a long time in survival mode.
Yeah.
Very lonely.
Yeah.
How would you describe the loneliness? I mean, was it lonely? Like if you were at a movie, you were lonely. If you were out eating, you were lonely. Were there ever places you could escape that loneliness, or was it just always there?
Like a couple people who would like make me feel sane, because you like a lot of time it's hard to stick to your guns when I still find that that's happening when people are against you and you like feel like this is wrong, like this is wrong, I don't want to be part of this, you know. And that ultimately was the end of that marriage. It's more complicated than that, but you know, when you have a very strong sense of right and wrong and the people around you are just like frittering through life and watching TV and like, you know, not paying attention to the things around them, at least that's how I felt like I was seeing all this stuff and, you know, just about life in general and the world, and the people around me just like didn't care about. It's like The Walking Dead, I guess, you know. You're like there's all these zombies and then there's you and you're just like, does anyone care that all this stuff is happening?
The script, I want to get the Bible there, Jodi. I want to read a couple of verses because in each podcast, we usually read a couple of scriptures. And this one is on the passage of scripture where Jesus talked about if you forgive, you're forgiven. But if you don't forgive, you're not forgiven. So do you just want to read that, Jodi? And then what I want to give you time to think about, Stacie, is have you forgiven Ben? Have you forgiven people who said stupid things? Have you forgiven the people in your life where you in process? So go ahead and read it, and then we'll come back to the question.
Okay. Matthew 6, 14 to 15. For if you forgive others their sins, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, neither will your Father forgive your sins.
A lot of times in grief, people struggle with forgiving the person that left them or the people that have been involved. Did you ever have to go through that, Stace?
Yeah. I think I mean, maybe that's one thing that time does do. I don't really blame anybody. I don't blame Ben. I understand why he wanted to be on that team. He was bored. He needed something to do. I don't know what I would have done if I was on the ship at the time and I had anything to say about anything. I don't know. I don't blame my ex-husband for the things that led to his choices in his life, because not all of that was his fault. I mean, I think I've come to, I've many instances, events, and difficulties later. I've really come to see all of those events in much more of a terms of long term, long game, and much more relevant to a spiritual battle. And in that sense, there's nothing to forgive. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, when you're a kid, you hear the verses of, oh, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. You can hardly give that the credence it deserves when you're young. I think it's almost impossible. In retrospect, that's how I feel in retrospect. If I had known what I know now when Ben had died, you know, what I would have, you know, you said, well, you know, don't get mad, steel yourself, because it's only just beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it's interesting is when people talk about pain, especially, you know, the old hymn says, like, when sea billows roll, like when it's pain after pain after pain, there are spiritual components in that. And I go back to who Stacie was when she was like 16 or whatever. I mean, you were just on fire for God in every area of your life. And I always looked at you as one of those just like people that God could do so many things through. And you just wonder if the enemy thought the same thing. And that there was definitely spirit. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's how I feel now. That's what in retrospect, I think I've, you know, like when there's a battle happening, some people become casualties of it. Some people can't bear to think about it anymore, and they, you know, can't continue mentally. Some people become injured and are removed from the fight. Others get injured and they patch them up and they throw them back out there.
Yeah. And I think that's a good way to look at it, because, you know, Stacie, there's so many people listening, you know, that have all different kinds of hurt, not just the loss of a loved one, but whatever the cause of the hurt is. And they fail to realize it is a warfare, you know, and like you said, some people get seriously wounded where it takes a long time to recover, and they shouldn't feel bad about taking a long time to recover. But, you know, sometimes you do, you know, and other people have been set aside for a short period of time. Other people get discouraged with the fight and quit, you know, but the reality of it is there were spiritual things at work as well as things in the material world that Stacie had to process as this young bride and this young believer. And, you know, nobody at your age, Stace, would have known how to handle that well. I don't care when that it could have happened to you after 15 years of marriage. It would have been just as deep of a crisis. It just would have, you probably would have handled it differently.
Well, and the character of God isn't someone to look at you at that age and be like, come on, get up. Come on. Step up, carry on, get on with it. Like, that's just not God's nature. He was in it with you. And I think if Jesus was there right in person with you, he would have just sat and put his arm around you. Because what could if people couldn't have said anything to help you, and all Jesus could say to you was, I'm here.
Well, you know, it was funny because I go back to the night of the funeral, and I went back and Stacie was sitting on like a bench or whatever. And this girl's strong. I mean, physically strong, right? Stacie, you've always kind of prided yourself. And I remember very vividly, I came up, I didn't have anything to say. And I put my arm around you and you just fell on me. And you were like, you were weightless. It was the only word I could describe. And for me to sit there and go, to take this girl, I mean, she was an athlete. She was tough. She was physical. She persevered in all those things. And to be brought to a point of like just complete weakness,
exhaustion.
Yeah. But, you know, I've always been of the persuasion that the people that God wants to use in the most significant way have to go through brokenness. They just have to. Without brokenness, you're very self-righteous, and you talked about those people who came up and, they say stupid things at funerals and things like that. They're well-meaning, but they're really self-righteous because they're speaking into a hurtful situation in which they cannot relate or identify. So they just throw a truth at it. And that actually can end up wounding instead of helping.
I think that was one of the hardest things, actually, now that you say that, it was going back to school and being like 21 years old and having the market completely cornered on senior transferred widows. I'm like, who are my friends here? Who understands this?
Nobody, right?
Nobody. Yeah. That was lonely.
Yeah. And so you become, at age 21, like you said, like a subgroup in culture that just doesn't fit in anywhere. Well, all right. Well, recently it seems like you've had like a little bit of a renaissance in your faith and just in your heart. I know you got a great husband now and the farm you live on, kids, that you love and everything like that. Do you kind of sense like there's a little bit of a renaissance spiritually, that maybe there's a new chapter of your life that's coming now, a new chapter?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I would say that was kind of a deliberate decision because, I won't get into the reason here because that's a totally different topic, but something was happening in my life that made me very fearful. And I was in my car driving somewhere and I just like looked out over the fields and just said, God, you help me with this and I'm back in the fight.
Wow.
Help me with this and I'm in.
Wow.
Back in.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's not easy to say though, is it?
No.
Because we won't share any details, but Stacie is in a fight right now. We're talking to you at maybe another one of the most hurtful times of your life, right?
Definitely the most fearful.
Yeah, the most fearful.
Definitely the most fear.
And again,
you don't want to live in fear. And that's not what God has called us to. And, maybe I was doing it just as much for myself as I was for him, but I had written out, for God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of sound mind. And I wrapped it in a little gift for my son and gave it to him. And like a month later, I noticed that he had shoved it in the case of his phone so that he could keep it with him all the time. That has been another thing to over it. Like, don't be reactive. Stop panicking. God's in control. Don't always understand it, but I do think, and I've shared this with you, I think that there's a sea change coming in our world right now.
Yeah.
And
I was excited to see Asbury.
Isn't that awesome?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So what does your day-to-day fight look like now as opposed to before a couple years ago?
I'm just more calm. Like, I think I've come to a place where I don't see peace and contentment as the same thing anymore. I am peaceful. I'm not content. I continue to fight my fights. I have the perception that on some level will never be content here because we are never designed to be here forever. So this is not our place, and we're never going to be totally satisfied with what we have in front of us on this earth. So I'm peaceful about what I'm doing, discontent, and continue to fight.
Yeah. And I do agree. Something's happening. This world, especially our Western American culture, has become just out of control in every way. And I think there's people who are looking around going, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. This is wrong. Whatever my view may be, what you're saying is wrong and normal, or is right and wrong, and what's normal isn't right and wrong and normal. And their eyes are going, there have to be some lines drawn.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to go see the movie, The Jesus Revolution. I don't know if you saw it yet, but it's the story about the movement among the hippies in the 70s and the Jesus movement. But what it was is they had left church, they had left government, and they were seeking truth. That's all they wanted truth. And they tried to find it in drugs, it didn't work. They tried to find it in meditation, it didn't work. They tried to find it in rock music, it didn't happen. But what happened was ultimately they found really the source of truth. And I think, Stacie, that's kind of what you're saying. In this broken world, people are looking for substantive truth to rest on.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at your story and your testimony. If you take Jesus out of this equation and he wasn't there for you during this time, I don't think I would be talking to you right now.
No, I think I would have a drinking problem. I'd be somewhere else.
Yeah.
But that's what I was meeting with a 14-year-old the other day. And I said, tell me about your friends at school. Tell me about what they think about Christianity. Like, do they know you go to church? And she's like, no. I said, what do you think they would say? What questions would they have? Kids that have no experience of church, that just see what they see on the media of God or Jesus, or if they see it at all. And she said, they just want answers. They just don't know what truth is. They don't know where to go because they don't have a source of truth anymore. So they have to kind of figure it out for themselves. And that's overwhelmingly overwhelming. Like there's no other way to describe it, because they're just lost.
Yeah, I think I'm noticing that a little bit in my teenage son, where he just finds so many things that are presented to him to be empty. We went to church on Sunday and we got in the car and he goes, church is so refreshing.
Wow.
That's great.
Wow. And that's probably part of your healing too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, to have your son have such an interest in spiritual things, he's kind of reminds me of a girl that I knew a long time ago, just to have that warmth and vibrancy about spiritual things, that he would put that wrapper in his phone. I mean,
and he certainly doesn't know, and this is part of my grief is that I was too wrapped up in my own issues and grief and problems to teach him all of this stuff that I should have taught him. So I regret getting him started so late in all of that education, but he's interested now. So
well, and even though you weren't verbalizing it, which you kind of regret now, he still saw his mom.
Yeah.
He saw the strength there, and you always loved him, and you are a committed, mom and mother and wife and all those things, and I think maybe you guys are going to enjoy this spiritual renaissance together, there's a verse in the Bible that says those that are saved will stand until the end. Okay. And perseverance is a very underrated characteristic of Christians. And I'm sitting there going, sometimes what God does is he has you fight your entire life just to get through to the end and to stand. And I think, if that's the example you gave to your son, that's an awesome gift to give. Much better than that, he's singing choruses and has, comic books with Jesus on him and that kind of stuff. So, I'm going to continue to pray, that your son actually grows up to have the same vibrant faith that his mom did, when she was that age. Because he's how old now?
15.
See, there you go. He's getting ready to enter into that. So, well, Stace, one of the things.
I wish I could send him to England with you.
Yeah, well, hey, we're talking about going back to England
answer a lot
of
questions for him.
We're talking about going back to England, so hopefully
that would be so
everything
fun.
in your life will be straightened out, and you can help me lead the team. So
that would be great.
You want to share that?
We every interview we do in every episode, we've been going through the attributes of God, just to kind of put that in there, this solid, this is who God really is. Because our view of God and our opinion of God and how we see him can get so totally screwed when we go through pain and hurt. And so it's just a reassurance. So today it's the attribute of God as holy. And it's really short, but it's simply God has a perfect moral nature. He is sinless and incapable of sin. Do you want to explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, we talked about before, people fall in love with a God that loves them. Okay. But if they're not aware of God's holiness, it's holiness married to his love that actually creates a beautiful relationship. He not only loves us, but he wants absolutely what is best for us. And as a person goes through life, if everything is only about how much God loves me and he cares for me and he's going to fix me and he's going to take care of me, but they never ever are concerned with the fact that he hates sin. He hates sin because it offends him, but he hates it also because it damages and hurts us. And so, when you go through grief like Stacie did, or other people with other sources of grief, you can't just come to God with just his loving part. You got to look at his just part. You got to look at his powerful part. You got to look at his all-knowing part, and even his holy part. And, Stace, I've been with you before in times when we were praying together in a group and God's spirit fell and you could just sense the holiness of God, right? And it's a beautiful thing. And I have to believe those experiences that, we've had in our lives, that's one of the reasons we can't let go of God in these deep crises, because deep down inside, we know, yes, he loves us, but we also know that he is this holy, sinless, pure place that we can go to. Man, when you get into the presence of a holy God, it is incredible what it can do for your inner self. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Well, if you didn't, we would have.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where you can't, I can't explain it. Well, I can't, you can't explain that.
Yeah, there's just no way to, but if you experience it, it's just like the most tremendous thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like a lot of kids grow up thinking God is this like old dude sat on a cloud, which isn't very powerful at all.
No, not at all.
It's kind of creepy, actually. And that's what I grew up seeing God as. And then I remember it was one of the first times I read through Revelation, and I was reading about the throne room and the holy, holy, holy. And even in a lot of the Old Testament prophetical books about the eyes on the creatures, and like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's who I'm praying to. That's who loves me. That's how much power he has in heaven and over the earth. I don't only know that he loves me, but that means I respect him and I wholly fear him. And I just think it's incredible because it gives you this perspective and this comfort. Like, there's not just this random dude in the cloud that's kind of magical that cares about me. It's like this massive, massive, powerful creator, just who is in control of the entire universe, who I can trust.
And he hates injustice.
Yeah.
He hates lying. He hates deception, those things that you faced, and knowing that there's a God who hates the very things that are torturing this young, widow. There's some comfort in that, to know that there's someone out there who's got a standard that's much higher than the standard of the world and the people and the institutions you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So, well, Stace, one of the things we do at the end of the program is we ask our guests to pray for the people that are listening. And what we'd like you to do is just have in your mind the picture of you when you were a young widow, and all that hurt and difficulty and questioning that you were facing. And if you were tonight to sit with somebody who was in a similar circumstance now, how would you pray for them? Or what would you pray for them? Or what would your advice be to them? So I guess if there's anything you want to say as far as advice, you could do that, and then just go ahead and pray for all those that are hurting tonight, that have lost people and are facing some of the deep hurt that you have.
Okay. I guess I don't really have any advice, because I feel like everyone deals with grief in their own way, and that might be one of the things that annoyed me about the things that people say. Like, they do the things that they would find comforting. So maybe that's the advice. Don't get upset with people who don't grieve the same way as you.
Mm-hmm.
That's their way of of grieving, and to see it through that lens, that's how they would do it if it were them. They're just trying to help.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, just lead us in prayer as we close out the program.
Thanks, God, for this time. It's refreshing to be with old friends and meet new ones. It's kind of hard to think back and imagine being in that situation again. And I don't like imagining it happening to someone else. But surely it is somewhere. So for those people who are experiencing loss, especially too young, just give them peace. Help them be aware of their spiritual surroundings. Help them be on guard and see clear-eyed what's really happening to them. Give them a great vision for where they are, the place in their lives that they are, and the place in eternity that they are at that moment. And it's only a speck. And bless them. Anyone going through this sort of thing, just bless them.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Well, Stace, it's always good to see you. When the weather gets nice, we'll come out. Maybe I'll bring the Brits with me. They have 2 little British babies.
Yeah.
And they would love the farm, wouldn't they?
Oh, they do. We're an outdoor family, so they would love it.
Great.
They keep asking me if we can have a garden, but we've only been here a year and we haven't got that yet.
So they'll throw on their wellies. And, come out and visit Stace, and
you can pull some weeds here. I got enough of that.
You got plenty to do.
For our true American listeners and followers, wellies are rain boots.
Yes.
I have to add that in there.
Yes. You want to give the little closing tag?
Yes. So if you're following on YouTube, hey, make sure you subscribe and like the video. And if not, if you're listening, go ahead over to Facebook and Instagram and make sure you're following us. If you want to message us, if you want to talk about what we've talked about today, we are here and we would love to talk with you. So don't feel like you have to grieve alone if you don't have anyone around you right now. We are here and we would love to talk and pray. So we'll see you on the next episode.
Great.
Goodbye.
God bless. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.